Sawadee Ka. Hello. Let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and thank you for returning to our Let's Start Healing podcast. You just heard me say hello in Thai. Sawadee Ka. You know, we have a line here. You know what we say? What we have in common can change the world. You know what else can change the world? Your intuition, that gut feeling that you have. We all have it. And our guest today is going to talk about this. She is an intuitive. Her name is Joanne Cohen. She's an intuitive here in the metro Atlanta area. And I am so grateful to have her here with us. You might not believe in intuitives or what some people call psychics, but a lot of you, I know, I bet everyone believes in your own instincts. You know, that inner knowing that we all have, that gut feeling. So as I say, that is some of what Joanne's going to talk about. But she's also going to talk about her own spiritual path, which is so fascinating. I'm really excited for you to meet her. Before you do, I want to invite you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, visit our Let's Start Healing podcast YouTube channel, and send me an email. Let me know how you like our podcast. Send me an email at letsstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. So now let's get to it. Let's meet her. Let's start healing. Joanne, thank you for joining the Let's Start Healing podcast. And I would like for you to share with our listeners about your gift as an intuitive and a medium and how that came about. When were you first aware?
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me here. It's lovely to be with you and all the listeners. Well, I think I was always aware of things that were not sort of visible to other people. I was always aware of a presence around me. Even as a child, I have very vivid memories of hearing a voice in my mind talking to me all the time, and which I assumed was God, and seeing things. So I was always aware of seeing colors, and I now understand were sort of orbs of light. Now I understand what they are, but and I always imagined that I could speak to people or see people that were no longer living, and that was just something I remember as a child. And I switched that off for a number of years, and then about 20 years ago, I was going through a personal struggle, disastrous marriage, and had just lost a child, and I had a moment of awakening. I started praying, and I needed help. I needed guidance. And I felt like God tapped me on the shoulder and said, you have to wake up now, and you have to become aware of a number of things. And I was made aware. I was able to see and sense and was guided very clearly exactly what I needed to do to open up these gifts that I was sort of aware of, but I knew that the next step was there, and I had to. And so it was at my sort of most vulnerable, where I was completely open and praying, and I had just had this terrible loss, and that's when God jumped in and said, well, here you go. This is what you need to do.
Wow. So when you first experienced these gifts as a child, were you frightened by them? And
not at all. It was very normal.
It was normal.
Really normal. So, and I knew things before I should have known them. And I was fascinated by any talk about God, souls, energy. Even then, I knew that it was all very meaningful, and I didn't know exactly what it all meant until years later. But I have vivid memories of it as a child.
Do you know why you put it aside, sort of put it on the back burner?
I think I got busy being a teenager, just being normal, being angry at my mother and, rebellious and things like that. And I always knew when I was ignoring my intuition, always. And every time I ignored it, everything got messed up. And but I knew it somewhere inside me, and I just wasn't ready to listen, wasn't ready to look at it. And but as I said, years later, and I always used to have a sense about things, but it wasn't until years later where I actually realized that I could call upon it and trust it and rely on it, and that it was all a connection to God.
Right.
I thought it was something separate, and now I've come to understand that it's all from God, and we all have these abilities. It's just a question of tuning into them and expanding them, if you want to.
Is your the loss of your child something that you're comfortable sharing with
totally.
us? Or
Totally, it was the greatest gift, for in that moment of complete surrender, vulnerability, loss, devastation, my awakening became apparent in that time.
was your child how old?
He was stillborn. He was stillborn. So
I see.
the day I went into labor was the day he died.
Wow.
And then I had to give birth to him right after that.
No kidding.
And strangely enough, that during that whole pregnancy, I knew that I couldn't imagine actually the child growing older. And I kind of had an intuitive sense about it. And a number of interesting things happened while I was pregnant. But the night I was in labor, I heard that voice in my mind say, "Go get your book on pregnancy and read the chapter on stillbirth."
No kidding.
Oh, honestly. And I'm like, "Oh, this is terrible." And I was having contractions, and the baby had gone quiet, but this voice was persistent. "Go get the book, read the chapter." I locked myself in the bathroom. I read the chapter. I knew exactly what to expect. And when I got to the hospital, I knew. And so it was great for me. It was not so good for my husband at the time, because I was trying to say it, trying to tell him something in the car on the way there. But it was my intuition. It was a message from God saying, prepare yourself, but there's more to come after this. And so soon after this happened, I had some incredible experiences. I felt really good after this whole thing happened, and my body felt good. I felt energized and positive, and I kept thinking, this is ridiculous. I just had this terrible thing happen, and yet I feel so damn good. And that was all of my intuitive energy opening up, my love energy opening up. It was huge. I was seeing things. It was beautiful. It was actually a beautiful experience. So that is interesting how it works, where you have this terrible thing happening, and yet on the other hand, there's something beautiful in it. And I have to say that this baby gave me the greatest gift of my life. That's what I have to say about that. So it was a really interesting experience.
Oh my goodness. And also what I get from that is that God seemed to be very specific in that he was calling you to
totally.
do what you're doing.
Oh, it's time to go to work that was the main part of the message. And I had other experiences. I mean, not long after that, I was guided to get a book, because I had no one to talk to, really, about some of the interesting experiences I was having. I was meditating, and I would see things and hear things, and there was no one to talk to at that time. So I talked to myself. That was it. And
you read.
And I read. I read one book in particular, and it sort of came to me randomly, and I had a lot of questions answered at that point. And
what kind of questions did you have? Do you remember?
Like, why am I having these crazy dreams? And why can I suddenly hear what everyone's thinking? And what's with the lights? It's like a light show, and I'm hearing things. And I had some very intense visions not long after that of angels. And I was not an angel believer, because I thought they were very pretty, but I didn't feel particularly connected to them until I had a visitation with one. And it was not long after I had the miscarriage or the stillbirth that these things started happening. And it was certainly within a few months. But message came through very clearly. And it was, get your gifts together and get out there and help people. That was the main thing.
So I've told myself a story that it's something that you can sort of call to yourself, and you might not necessarily walk around seeing things all the time. But do you walk around and you see things all the time, or is it something you
No.
just focus?
It's
Yeah,
when I'm
so-
in the, yeah, I have to be
Yeah.
in the zone.
Yeah.
Although my intuition works all the time. So I will wake up in the morning thinking about somebody, and I guarantee you they will either text me, call me, or need me. And I have that with many clients. I have thousands of clients. And so I will just, someone will pop into my mind, and I will guarantee you within 24 hours they will reach out to me. But I make it a rule not to look at anything that isn't my business. So, you know, I do see the deceased. I see the deceased. I'm a medium. I communicate with them, but I would never randomly see somebody's, you know, grandmother. Yeah, that's passed. I would never randomly see that unless I was in the zone and it was asked for, and it was appropriate. But I find that many of us are very sensitive. I think you're very sensitive to energies and things like that. We don't want to feel everything all the time.
Right.
Because this is a very chaotic world.
Right.
And so we don't want to feel it all. So you learn techniques on how to manage that, you know.
Yeah. And my thought is that everyone, because God, for me, I believe God is in us. And so all of us have an intuition, and some of us have other gifts. You know, we might not all have your gifts, or some people I know, they see colors. Other people I know, they hear sounds. Some people are, you know, psychic, and they, you know, things come to them. And so my thought is that it's about how much we cultivate it. Do you think that's true? Or, because I know for me, I have intuition. And when I was a teenager growing up, it would scare me, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. And so it was probably, gosh, I was probably well into my 30s before I started trusting it and welcoming it back.
Yeah.
So do you think it's something that we all carry? We might not all have the gifts to the same degree, but we all have something.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's in all of us. I think we're all made the same, and that it's just a question of what you focus on. And if you're meant to do that, you know, I feel,
Yes.
you know, it's a choice. I feel like it's a choice to hone those gifts that we all have. And I believe that everyone can grow those gifts if they want to. Everyone.
Yes. And you just said something. Did you say whether we're meant to do that? Because I so feel that this is what you are meant to do after
completely.
what you've shared.
Completely. I had a
Yeah.
completely different career before all of this started.
What was that?
I was a professional singer. So I was...
Get out.
Yeah, I was singing classical. I was an opera singer. And
You're
I did...
kidding.
Yeah, and I did jazz and cabaret and things like that. So I was always performing. And I also did a lot of religious singing. So in churches and synagogues. And I always felt the connection through my music. And it didn't matter what I was singing. I was always in that connected, meditative zone where I was connecting to God, really. It could be through music. It didn't matter. So what I had a little change in career. It's essentially the same thing. It's just a slightly different style. So instead of singing, I am speaking. And so I'm still communicating, and it's all with God moving through me. That's what I feel. But I do think that everyone has this within them.
Wow.
And it's a choice. It's a choice. Some people don't want to have the sensitivity. They just don't. And that's their choice. But it's all available. It's available to all of us.
I think that could be scary. I know my best friend, we grew up together, and I say to her, you know, you can come, if you die first, you can come back and visit me. And she tells me I can't come back and visit her because that's scary.
Right.
But she would have a session with you and, you know, be happy to connect through a session.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not for everyone. I completely admit that.
So when you see colors, is it around a person? Or can you describe that?
Sometimes it's around people, like their aura. I'm sure people have heard of auras.
Yeah, I know I've heard of that, but I don't exactly know what it is.
Well, I believe that we emanate. I think that's the right word. Certain energy, and every energy has a frequency to it, and every frequency matches a color or a sound. And so I see frequencies, I hear frequencies. So I hear what your energy sounds like. So it's kind of freaky, but if I'm like texting with somebody, I can hear what their energy sounds like. It's like a frequency in my mind.
Can you give an example of what a frequency might sound like?
It's almost like it's like a whirring, like a whir sound, like a whirring sound. Or some people have, do you call it tinnitus? Tinnitus?
I've heard of that.
Yeah, when you hear like a
ringing
in your ears. So it's sort of like that, but there's like a rhythm to it. And everybody has a different signature because everyone's energy looks different, sounds different. And I'm able to see the color of people's energy. And so it could be influenced by what they're feeling, what kind of people they are, if they're creative people, if they're very right brain or very left brain. It shows in color, and I can feel if someone's angry. I can see it in a color, but I also hear the frequency of their energy. That's what it sounds like. And it's very interesting.
That's
and
fascinating.
I've proved this to myself over the years. I've just,
How so?
well, if I'm in the olden days, when AOL was all there was online, and you did instant messaging and you were typing, I once was online with a very old friend, and it was when my gifts had just really started to open up. And the little box opened up, on the screen, and they hadn't signed on yet, but I could hear their energy. I could hear it. And I thought, that sounds like my friend. I think that's my friend. And then a second later, she popped up. It was her name. And that kind of thing started happening over and over again. And so I realized that everyone has their own particular frequency, which I happen to hear. But the colors I also see in like orbs, so and different colors. And I have orbs that are around me, which I know, and
Meaning that they're your personal orbs?
Yep, they're around me all the time. And then I see other people's. And so, and I might be distracted in the middle of a session because I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful, big, rosy red orb of light. And then I go back to the conversation and I can't keep my eyes off it because you just see this beautiful light. You want to look at it. And sometimes I just communicate with everything. That's really what I do. So I can communicate with the color, which sounds kind of odd, but there's an intelligence to it. And there's a message to everything. So if you see a lot of yellow around somebody, it might mean one thing. If you see a lot of blue around someone, it might mean something else.
And so is it just a matter of time and experience of learning for you what those colors have meant?
It has been. I mean, I have not read very many books. I've been very guided not to read a lot, to allow the information to come to me kind of direct, so I feel like I've been trained, by source, if you want to call it that. And so, because I didn't want to get cloudy with what everyone else thought, people think blue means this. I wanted to see what it meant to me. And so that's just how I've learned, and it seems to work.
So I've had sessions with you, and do you communicate with people who've been in your own life who you may have lost, or do you do that sometimes?
I do. It's I'm very big on boundaries, and so nobody comes to me unless it's the appropriate moment. So unless it's something important. I lost my father, I guess, around 27 years ago, something like that. He died the year my daughter was born. And he's come to me a few times over the years, and it's usually when it's something like important. And I actually lost my closest friend about 2 years ago. And she and I also, like you and your friend said, like I said, I was with her when she passed, and I said, you're going to come, you're going to see me, and I'm going to be listening because I know how to do that. And she has come many times, stuck her nose into my business, and told me what she thinks I should be doing and shouldn't be doing. But it's a joyful practice working with those who have crossed over, and it's very healing for the person that you're working with. That you're, I only do it for healing purposes, not for entertainment value, or it's for a purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, can you describe your personal relationship with God?
Well, I have always felt God was not just loving, but a loving intelligence, and always there, just within me, around me, influencing everything. And I always felt there was a benign, loving intelligence around me, always. And even my earliest memory, I was a very God person, always. And wanted to talk to everybody about it, actually. And you'd be amazed, not everybody wants to talk about God. And I would ask a million questions. And I was born Jewish, so I went to Hebrew school. And I wasn't that interested in learning the language. I just wanted to be in the presence of where God was. And I didn't believe in the organized religion part of everything. I enjoy ritual like everybody else does, but I found that it was the connection. It was which I felt was direct. And even when I was 5, and 6, I would ask to go to synagogue, which was very odd. I would ask to be taken there, and so I could feel it and be a part of it. So,
wow. So you had an awareness of God from a very, very early age.
Yeah, I heard a voice in my mind talking to me, and I never felt alone. I always felt that there was someone there, always, and there is. And now I understand better, but I always did.
So, based on what you know, because you can connect with God and with energy, with people of past, what do you think happens when we leave this form? Is it different depending on how much we are evolved, or is it? What do you think?
I think it's all basically the same. I think the process is pretty much the same. I think in the moment, my understanding, and it was really brought home to me when my girlfriend passed away a couple of years ago. I was with her right up until the moment, and then the hospice nurse asked me to wait outside. And just outside the room, and I did. And I was sitting there, just sitting there, and I saw my friend, her soul. I could see it. She walked right over to me, and it was not as clear as it would be with her being alive, but it was no doubt it was her. And she came and said, "I'm going to go now." I said, "Okay." And then she moved away. And after that, in meditation, I said, "So tell me, so what's the 411 on what actually happens?" And I ask this a lot, or actually the souls really volunteer a lot of information, but the process seems pretty much, especially if someone's, let's say, in the hospital and they're on the verge of passing, sometimes the soul begins to leave the body. So just like in the movies, sometimes the soul is actually watching the end, especially if the body is pretty much just shutting down. And then after that, they kind of move, I don't know if you want to call it moving into the light or whatever you want to call it. But there's a process where I feel they're greeted by a loved one or their angels or someone meaningful to them, which is usually decided on beforehand. And they move through different stages of evolution and learning and growth. I think that there's a life review. Normally, this is what they usually tell me, is that there's they have to look back at their life, what they've learned, what they haven't learned, if they need to stay nearby family for a while. I've seen that many times to help heal something. If the family member's not ready for them to leave, or vice versa, there's usually some, and it's all kind of orchestrated and overseen, I feel, by God, and for the purposes of healing. And then after that, they kind of move to different stages, and sometimes they they do different. These souls do different things. Some work, some help others cross over. Some have to just focus on their healing, and that's part of evolution. But I believe the process is the same for everybody. We're all the same.
When you mentioned that your close friend, you saw her soul. What can you describe the appearance of that?
Well, she kind of took the form she had in body, but it was very, it was not like definite and clear with color. It was more sort of a whitish kind of look to it, but it was the feeling. It was so clear to me that it was her.
Sure.
And she was there. And I knew what was going on in the other room. I knew that she was in the process of passing. And I just wasn't supposed to be in there for that exact moment. But it was a sense that I had that it was her. And when I see other people's energy, it kind of looks to me like it's hard to describe. It's sort of like a whitish movement it's almost like an iridescent look, and it moves, and I can see it, and that's how I know that there's someone there. And then the next step would be to kind of ask in my mind, who are you? Because all these energies are telepathic, so I would ask, who are you? And then I would get an answer, and that's how I start. I just talk to them like I talk to everybody. So they're just so they're not, people without bodies,
right? So they're not, because from movies we have the impression that there's a body standing right here,
right?
But no, it's like a white energy kind of thing. It's sort of like a white.
That's how it appears to me. But sometimes when I'm in the midst of a medium session, I will see the person. Sometimes it's just in my mind, and I'll get a very strong image, and I could tell you hair color, eye color, because I see it, and that's how I can describe it perfectly. And then sometimes I will see it like an outline of someone, like I see you. I'll see an outline of someone, but it's not as clear as I see you with color. And the only time that I have actually seen someone complete 100% visual was the first time I saw Jesus. So that's going to open up a whole nother dialogue.
Yes.
But I saw Jesus exactly, and that's just...
What was the circumstance that brought about?
Well, that's a whole nother side to my story, which eventually I'll be writing about, which I've already started to write about. I felt very close to Jesus my whole life, and which is very odd for a nice Jewish girl from New York. But I used to feel him. Yeah, I used to feel him, and I sensed him all the time. I had the same initials as him. And but I was actually on a cruise, and I was on a metaphysical cruise, and I was actually presenting a class. And somebody else, it was her turn to present something. And I was sitting there, and I had felt Jesus, the healer, around me for a long time. And anyway, we were sitting in this, lecture that somebody else was giving, and standing next to her, the outline of a man. And then the outline became much clearer. And then I realized that he had long hair and a beard and was wearing robes. He was holding a book, and he had one finger up, pointing in my direction, looking at me. And without a doubt, I knew who it was. And I was a little freaked out, and I leaned over to my girlfriend next to me, and I said, do you see anything over there? And she looked at me, and she said, yeah, Jesus is here. And then we went on with the rest of the lecture. And I was a little shocked. Now, I saw this woman about 15 years later, and I asked her about it. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, you don't remember? You don't remember? She said, I have no recollection of what you're talking about. So I have no idea what that was, but all I know is that I saw him absolutely clear and 100%. And that kind of opened something up in me. And I've also seen Buddha, and I've seen other beings. It just made me more convinced that we're all part of something. And it doesn't matter what form or shape you are, we're all part of something. But I think I needed to see that. he became very influential after that. Not from a religious point of view, from a love point of view.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
I just the way his energy felt to me was pure love, and I had never felt that before. So it was so unconditional and loving and pure that I knew that I was so loved. I can't even describe it. It was indescribable, really. I felt so loved. And so, but I knew that it was just part of this universe, part of, it's just one part. There are many parts.
Right.
But it was a great gift. But I saw absolutely clearly.
So
100%.
that's you mentioned the universe, and that has me fascinated because I think I thought of the universe until recent years as just this one place, and that's it. And then the idea was introduced to me of it is just one place. I thought it was one and only. So you said it seems like you said a moment ago, maybe there's something beyond the universe.
Yeah.
What do you speak
It's so
to that?
interesting this morning. I was meditating this morning, and I guess I was thinking, maybe I was already connecting to you about today. And I heard very clearly in my mind that this is one of many universes, and it is endless, and it's all been created. And I didn't ask, was it all created by God, and how
Sure.
I didn't ask in my mind, but I just got this image of endless, countless. It just goes on and on and on and on. Now there may be smaller universes within this
Sure.
larger, expanse. And that's the way I've always felt ever since I was a child. I always felt that it was limitless. Always talked to the stars, all of that, stars in the skies, and that it was limitless. And that was the thought that came to me this morning. It just goes on and on and on. We're kind of a speck here. We're kind of a speck.
Yes. And I can comprehend that. What's hard for me to comprehend and get my brain around is that God always is. Like there is no beginning.
Yeah.
I can't grasp that. Like it's like there's no starting point.
Yeah. To me, God is an ever-present energy that is always there. It always has been and always will be. That's
the has been part is that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it seems it's logical. So that's where, because I'm very logical also.
Yeah.
Even though I'm kind of out there, I'm extremely logical. If it's in this moment, it was probably in the previous moment. I trust that it was probably in the previous moment. So trust comes into it too.
Yeah.
But to me, this loving force is there all the time, and it just always has been. And even though we only have this moment, as everybody says, live in the moment. And this is the moment. That's true. That's really all.
It really is.
Yeah. But I trust, and I go by what I have witnessed, that it was probably there in the previous moment too. Yeah.
And so speaking of that, presence, I think, is where we really do connect with God and our intuition and know what's real. When we think about when our mind gets going and we're not in the moment, that's when things can, I know for me, can go awry.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that, the power of being present? Because I would think that's huge for you.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like respecting yourself enough. It's even more than respect. It's this inner focus and presence that you value so much of where you are that you stay 100% present right here, right in front of you. And the only thing that takes us out is our mind. It's, your heart is always here. Your energy is always within you. We're always within our bodies for the most part. And it's that constant connection to the source that's in you, to keep going back to that over and over again. And it becomes a habit, and you have to practice it, though. And it's, people talk about all of this meditation business and whatever. You don't have to meditate. There's lots of different forms of connection. You don't have to sit, cross-legged on the floor, saying om. There are lots of different ways to connect. But I feel like it's this honoring of where you are in the moment that comes, I think, with loving yourself, and that's what we're all striving for, where you love yourself so much that you're going to stay here, and you're going to just stay very, very present with yourself. And as I said, anxiety, we all have anxieties, but anxiety comes from looking ahead, and not being present
absolutely
in the moment.
Is there something in common that your clients have that resonates, that you've noticed, that something that they search for?
It's usually love, but it's not the love of a person. It's not a romantic love. It's loving themselves. And because I believe that the moment we truly accept ourselves and love ourselves for who we are, everything changes in your life. Everything falls into place. It doesn't mean things are perfect. It just means that you can cope with everything.
You have peace.
But yeah, and the majority of people I find spend a lot of their time judging themselves, beating themselves up about what they have and haven't done. That they spend so much time doing that, they forget that they're beautiful the way they are. And it doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement, because we're all here. That's what we're here for. That's what we're doing. We're growing and learning. But you have to accept where you are in every moment. And I feel like that's the most common aspect of that people have in common. And people looking for peace, finding a way to peace within themselves, not around them, but within themselves. There's the other usual things they want to, find out what's coming in their future, but it's really more about where you are in the present. Yeah.
There's a question that I like to ask people that I'm going to just throw it out there, but clearly you're a healer. I like to ask if people see themselves as a seeker or a healer. Is there anything that you seek spiritually?
Absolutely. The thing I like about this whole world is that there's always something to learn. And I love to expand and go further, and my gifts open up more every day, and every year I can see how far it's come. My understanding about myself and about humans, there's always something to learn. But I feel that I'm on a path of service, so I'm here to serve and to support others in their process also, but not to neglect myself, which is also a very common theme with a lot of people, is that they neglect their own growth.
Yes, so because I remember when we first met, I met you in an interfaith circle, and I felt like it could be exhausting. Can you speak to that?
Oh, totally. When you're a healer of any sort, you're mixing with other people's energy. And unless you're very careful about your own boundaries, and I use the word boundaries in a loving way, it's that you love yourself enough to keep your own energy free and clear so that you can help others. But if you're so busy taking on other people's, whatever their emotional problems are, or if they've got heavy energy around them, if you're so busy taking that on, then you're doing damage to yourself, and then you won't be of use to others. But just the act of mingling with other energies can be very tiring for people. And when I'm working with someone, I'm 100% involved in that, and present with them. And so it takes an awful lot of focus. So if I have 5 hours of sessions in a day, for those 5 hours, I am completely in a semi-meditative state, focused, hyper-focused. That's tiring after about 5 hours.
Wow.
And you work with people that have had all sorts of issues. And it ain't easy being human. This stuff. I mean, there's a lot. It's very challenging, and people have challenging issues, and to be a healer, yes, you're helping them help themselves, but you can't help but pick up on some of that. You know, there's a lot of sadness in this world, and it can affect you after a while. So it's very important to maintain your own boundaries and to keep your own energy clear. Very important to do that.
So to nurture yourself spiritually, is it a meditation that you do, or what do you do for yourself regarding that in terms of releasing that kind of thing?
Well, I set a lot of intentions. I ask my angels to help me. I ask God to help me remain clear so that I can be functional and helpful. But I also love taking a salt bath. So Epsom salts or sea salt or anything like that, that's very helpful for clearing energy. And I love burning things. And so I burn sage and I burn all sorts of things to
clear
to
out.
help clear energy. But it's mostly it's an intention that you set. You want to be as effective as possible. And so you ask, please don't let me take on any of this. I need to be as effective as possible. So I said it's with intention, you know. But I also take care of myself. So I will go and I'll have work done on me occasionally. So before you arrived, actually, I did a trade with a wonderful healer. And so I gave her a session and she worked on my body.
Like a Reiki healing?
Well, sort
or
of like a
something?
healing, yeah. And so, and that's important for maintenance. So.
This has been so awesome.
Thank you.
I think more people, clearly, I can only imagine the journey that you've been on in terms of your work being more accepted. Yes. What has that been like?
Well, it's interesting. When my kids were young, I was a mom and I was a stay-at-home mom, and I used to sing in the evenings and on the weekends. And I was a PTA mom, and so that's how they knew me for a long time. And then when I started sort of telling my kids that mommy's doing something else now, and they walked around, oh, mommy's a psychic. Mom's a psychic now. Oh, God, now she's a psychic. And that was funny for a little while. And I slowly began to tell people, and I realized it was either going to be a conversation starter or a conversation stopper. So I'm very clear about what I do, and I've never had any issue with it. And I have people that, try and challenge me. I have the non-believers who, at a dinner party will say, "Okay, well, tell me what I'm thinking," and I'll look at them and I'll say, "I'm really not interested in what you're thinking." And sometimes I'll tell them what they're thinking, and that usually stops the questioning. But I feel like it's so natural. It's not woo-woo or magic.
Sure.
It's natural. It's just connecting to the natural forces that are around you and interpreting them and sharing them. That's really all it is.
I just lost my train of thought as you were talking. But I know this is what I was thinking. Before, when we were offline, we were talking about how a lot of us have a lot in common around the world.
Yes.
And so as the world has changed, even since 9/11, I mean, it's just become a smaller world. So the acceptance of the work that you do in the world, to me, seems to be much less your personal, in addition to your personal life. But do you see that?
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
All you have to do is watch television.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there are programs called The Medium, or
Right.
the Long Island Medium, or about ghosts. I'm not big into ghosts, but you watch television, you look at movies. Where do you think people get these ideas for films?
Right.
And the more you start, if you watch closely and look at the themes that are happening, I think that there are messages that are coming through in media, and I feel like it's very accepted. It's very accepted now.
Messages such
about
as
what's coming, opening up. It's natural to have a character in a drama series that's the spiritual one. It's becoming much more common. But I've noticed over the years that nobody raises an eyebrow anymore when I tell them what I do. It's very, unless you're back with the PTA moms, but for the most part, no one raises an eyebrow. So,
Um, Gosh, the questions that I normally ask, you've answered
well, good.
already.
That's
Thank
good.
you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
This is wonderful. How can people get in touch with you? What's the best way? Do you have a website?
I do have a website. It's pretty simple. It's joannecohenintuitive.com.
Okay.
And the best way to reach me is through the website.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I know the answer.
So, Joanne, will you talk about angels for a minute? And I forget about angels. I mean, I think when we're little, we grow up being taught about angels, and some people take them very seriously and know that there's angels around us, and some of us are just not cognizant of it.
Okay. Well, I may have said before, my first connection with angels was, I guess, around 17 years ago, when I was woken up in the middle of the night by a beautiful golden light. And it was almost like, I don't know if you remember, you're probably too young, the lava lamps from the 70s
Sure.
where they had
Yes.
dripping like golden light. Anyway, that's what it looked like above my head. And it turns out then there were some flapping noises, and this went on for about 30 minutes. And I didn't realize until the next morning that it was a visitation by an angel. And, as I said earlier, I was brought up Jewish, so it was not really in our traditional, belief system. It's in the Bible, of course, but I never really thought about them until that night. And I discovered it was the Archangel Gabriel. I found that out the next day because I was reading a newspaper article about a little boy named Gabriel, and the name virtually jumped off the page and smacked me in the face. And I realized it was Gabriel. And so, of course, went to the library and got every single book I could possibly find on angels. And in my research, I started to realize that angels are present around all of us. And it's not that they exist on their own. They're part of a system. So they're part of God's system for all of us. Mm-hmm. So it's not that you pray to them exclusively. You pray to God. You pray to whatever your version of God is, source or, divine love. And they're all part of the same system.
Are they to protect us?
For protection, for guidance, to share wisdom with us, but not to interfere in our lives. And you have to call them and ask them to help you. Mm-hmm. And so in my experience, and I know that I've had an unusual experience, so in my experience, when you call, they come. And you just have to recognize when they're there. And some of the angels are well known, Archangel Michael or Gabriel. Some of them are very well known, and some of them may not have names, or they may have names that you've not heard of before.
How would a person recognize that they're there?
I think that there's a sense around you. Mm-hmm. You feel a presence of some sort. Mm-hmm. And I always say to people, make believe it's there. What if it really is there? Oh, well, I feel it, but I don't think it's anything. I don't really believe it. Well, why not? Just make believe. Start with make believe that there's someone there and talk to him or her. So, talk and see what you receive back. And chances are you're being spoken to in some way. You're being communicated with. And I believe that we all have many angels around us. And some people feel their departed loved ones are angels, but they're not usually angels. They can be guardians of some sort. Mm-hmm. But the angels with the wings, I have seen many times. And these are beings that are so pure and multidimensional that they're not usually visible by the naked eye. Mm. And they have no ego. They're only here as messengers of God and the universe to support and to love and to guide. That's my understanding. Spirit guides are slightly different. I sometimes use the two interchangeably, guardian angels or spirit guides. And spirit guides are non-physical beings that are around us, that we are with and are with us our whole lives. Mm-hmm. And they help us in all aspects of our life, our growth. It's that voice in your head that says, slam on your brakes when you don't see a red light. That can be your guides speaking to you, helping you. And I believe we all have them. Every one of us, no matter what you do or don't do in your life, you always have guides and guidance around you.
Gabriel, does he represent something in particular?
Well, it was interesting because Gabriel appeared in female form to me. So she had long blonde hair, and but the interesting part of it, I wasn't allowed to look at it directly. So it was as if I had a hand over my eyes. I was lying in bed. It was 3 a.m. A hand over my eyes, not letting me look directly at it, but raising my consciousness to view it. The next day when I started reading, I read all about Gabriel being about communication and teaching and writing, which is what I've done my whole life, is communicating, singing, teaching. I've been teaching for years. And it was very clear. And after that visitation, I woke up the next morning. I knew exactly what my path was, exactly what it was. I couldn't write it out, but I had a sense of that's exactly what it was. But I see angels around people a lot. Some people really connect with them, and they're wonderful. They'll help you in every aspect of your life. Find a parking spot, find true love. They'll help you. Just have to ask.
Before we go for good, what type of classes do you teach?
Well, I run an angel message circle, so it's a weekly meditation, and people receive messages that the angels are sharing. And I teach all aspects of intuitive development, learning how to open up your intuition and growth. And I love leading guided meditations. I feel like they're very healing and able, they enable people to connect to themselves on a deeper level.
Are they at all different locations?
They're different locations, yeah.
Because don't you do something in Roswell?
I do at Plum Tree Yoga in Canton Street in Roswell.
And which one is that? Is that the circle?
Yeah, that's the circle.
Okay.
Every Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you, Joanne.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like us on Facebook, visit our YouTube channel, and send me an email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. And remember, let's start healing.